Robert Carlin, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So this second summit is about to get underway, and people have got conflicting reports on how successful the first one was. Critics say, oh, well, the president came back with good atmospherics, but nothing concrete. Others say, well, actually, some of what's transpired is quite concrete. Where do you stand in what's been achieved so far?
I think the first summit achieved what it had to achieve. It was the first time a U.S. president has met with the leader of North Korea. We needed to get some principles down on paper, which would help point the direction for the subsequent talks, and that's what we did.
A lot has been made of the issue of denuclearization. Both sides use that term and seem to mean different things. You have just come out with a paper that you've written along with others, including the great expert Siegfried Hecker on North Korean nukes. You yourself have been at the table under the Clinton administration on this very difficult issue. What should we expect from a U.S. point of view and a North Korean point of view denuclearization to mean?
We want to see the North Koreans cap their program, stop producing more material to make bombs. Then we want to see them begin to dismantle it. The North Koreans haven't committed to do anything yet, but they've started the process, at least, on capping the lethality of the program. That's pretty important. The next steps are what they're going to ask of us, and we're not sure. They haven't really put things on the table.
So when you say it's a pretty big deal that they've sort of capped the lethality of their equipment, do you mean specifically that they have not continued to test and improve the delivery systems, that they have not continued to test the nuclear devices? Is that what you specifically mean?
That's exactly right. If they don't test anymore, they probably can't perfect a hydrogen weapon. A hydrogen weapon is significantly more destructive than a normal atom bomb, and we don't want them to get to that stage.
What do you think is the logical expectation from this next round of summitry? We already know that the two principals, the leaders, have developed what appears to be a fairly decent personal relationship. What has to happen out of this summit to indicate that something is moving, the ball is moving down the field?
We're in a little bit of a pickle that we put ourselves in. That is, in the normal process of negotiations, you don't have to have a deliverable at the end of every meeting. Things develop in the meetings over time. You make progress, but you don't have a final outcome at the end of each meeting. And so you have a chance for ideas to sort of grow and compromises to be reached. Since we're at the summit, and because of the political pressures, there's really as you know, there's a big push that something has to come out of this meeting, something concrete. Well, what would naturally emerge, given the fact that we really haven't had that many meetings, and we haven't had a chance to chew over these things or poke and prod at the different options. The most likely things, it seems to me, are the easiest, which is what we should be tackling right away anyway. Possibility of an end of war declaration or some wording to that effect. That's important. It addresses one of the three things that the Singapore summit had listed. The possibility of some sort of sanctions relief, moderating. I don't know how we're going to phrase it. We're not going to say we're lifting sanctions, but is there some way to tweak it?
I want to ask you to explore the meaningfulness of what Kim Jong-un has already done. Well, we've talked about the freeze on nuclear testing and ballistic missile testing. We saw that just before the last summit, they blew up some tunnels that were meant to be their testing areas. How much has he done, and how much of that is verifiable, and how much has the U.S. done in return?
Kim pledged in April of last year that they would have no more nuclear or long-range missile tests. That's very easy to monitor with our technical platforms, and they haven't done either. That's important, again, because of the lethality of the program. He's also put on the table the possibility of allowing us into Yongbyon and dismantling it, disabling it, then dismantling it. That's a pretty important step. I know some people toss that off as unimportant because they say Yongbyon is an old facility, it isn't worth anything. I beg to differ. Yongbyon is the only place they produce plutonium and another component of a hydrogen weapon, tritium. If Yongbyon is shut down, they can't produce either one. That's very important. People say, well, they've got another enrichment facility somewhere in the country. Yeah, they probably do, and eventually we're going to have to get to it. But if we don't get to it right away, and yet we do shut down the enrichment facility in Yongbyon, that's very important. That's progress. We're not going to get the final prize right away. We need to move towards it, and we need to be realistic in what we can get and what we should be satisfied helps protect the national security interests.
So you've been, as I say, at the table. You've been in these close negotiations under the Clinton administration. You obviously watched what's been going on since. President Trump, talked to Kim Jong-un about the possibilities of an economic revival in his country if he changed his ways. He said that he believes that Kim Jong-un, was interested in that. There are two questions. I'm going to play. Let me first play President Trump's soundbite on this, and we'll talk about that.
I really believe that North Korea can be a tremendous economic power when this is solved. Their location between Russia, China, and South Korea is unbelievable. I think that North Korea and Chairman Kim have some very positive things in mind, and we'll soon find out.
So what is your assessment of how much the economic and the future sort of prizes dangling out there means to Kim Jong-un versus what others in the intelligence assess, and that is nothing is more important than regime survival, and for that they need to keep their nuclear options on the table?
2 points. To address the second thing that you raised, the intelligence community is making a judgment. They don't know that. It's a judgment that they're making based on what they think is a lot of pieces of paper that cross their desk. I don't necessarily know that that's true. What I do know is that we have evidence Kim Jong-un has been working on his economy from the day he took over. He has new ideas. I doubt if he'll ever use the term reform, but he's been making big changes in order to revive the economy. And I think that beginning last year, when he announced that the new strategic line is everything for the economy, is something that he's been adhering to, and therefore it feeds into the negotiations with the U.S. It isn't as if the Trump administration suddenly invented this. This is a door that the North Koreans have unlocked and opened up for us to explore, to see how far we can use progress in that area to get the things that we want in the area of denuclearization.
But there seems to be differing views of this summitry within President Trump's own administration and his close national security officials. We all know that John Bolton is very much more hawkish on all of this, including the idea of lifting any sanctions or delivering, anything to North Korea until the whole package is sealed, if it ever is. What do you make of that fact, particularly at a time when a confidential UN report says that North Korea's sanctions are failing, Pyongyang defying them with massive increase in illegal ship-to-ship transfers of petroleum products and coal as well?
This gap in the administration isn't new. We had it under the Clinton administration as well. They're always intensely skeptical parts of the administration. They're always pushing back against people who want to move ahead with negotiations. So I don't find it unusual. I think some people overrate what sanctions have done. I have no doubt that they entered into Kim Jong-un's calculations. I never thought that that's what brought him to the table. My view, based on the evidence that I saw, was that he made a decision several years ago that he was going to develop his nuclear program up to a point and then pivot.
So you're talking about pivoting to his economy and potentially to opening up and having a different relationship with the rest of the world. The other question is, and you've written quite a lot about this, the whole process of negotiations is very little understood in the United States. I mean, we've been struck by, well, whatever it was under the Clinton administration or under the Obama administration with Iran or now under the Trump administration, hardliners disdain the idea of compromise and negotiations, and it's sort of, for them, a zero-sum game. We have to win everything, otherwise we win nothing. You've written about process, about the impatience of Americans when it comes to these negotiations. Tell me about that. Tell me about the inside, around the table situation, the realistic one.
We're sitting down with a country that is not conquered by the United States. It has its own national security interests, regime interests, whatever. And so we simply can't sit down and dictate or slam our notebooks on the table and leave when they don't automatically agree to everything we want. We have to figure out ways to probe, to find out what they're actually willing to give and what they expect from us. And that takes some time. It takes good diplomacy. It takes, as I say, speaking precisely and listening carefully. It doesn't take forever. It's not a process by which they speak endlessly, wear us down, and get away with whatever they want. That's a phony narrative that some people put forth. We got the agreed framework in only 4 meetings.
You're talking about in the Clinton administration, which, that's right, put parameters around their military and nuclear programs.
That's correct. Very important agreement. It lasted for many years. It completely froze their program in Yongbyon. It had international inspectors there 365 days a year. So we made a lot of progress, and we opened the door to more progress, not just on nuclear, but a lot of different things with the North Koreans with that agreement. If you don't sit and talk, if you're not prepared to listen, if you're not prepared to understand that you've got to compromise in some ways, then you're going to end up with what we had the last 2 administrations, 16 years of failed policy.
You mean the George W. Bush administration and indeed the Obama administration?
That's correct. The North Koreans went from 0 nuclear weapons to about 30 or more in the last 16 years.
Let me play another soundbite, and this is from the commander of U.S. forces in the region, Korean Peninsula region, because, of course, one of the other issues is President Trump was criticized for agreeing to stop joint military exercises. And, of course, they have been quite dramatically scaled back between the U.S. and South Korea. Let's just play what the commander has said about that.
I remain clear-eyed about the fact that despite a reduction in tensions along the DMZ and a cessation of strategic provocations, coupled with public statements of intent to denuclearize, little to no verifiable change has occurred in North Korea's military capabilities.
Analyze what he just said.
He just said that the threat from North Korea, the conventional threat, I suppose, hasn't changed. And that's exactly right. On the other hand, we can make some changes in our own posture and joint exercise cycles with the South Koreans that don't significantly degrade our ability to deal with that threat. It's important to understand there is a narrative out there that the North Koreans only want to get the U.S. troops off the Korean Peninsula. I think that's dead wrong.
Really?
I think we've got a lot of evidence going back many years that the North Koreans want U.S. troops to remain. They want us to remain as a buffer against Chinese and maybe eventually Russian influence, that they see U.S. troops on the peninsula as a way to keep the U.S. committed to a relationship with them. So I think people have it wrong. I don't think they pay attention to what the North Koreans have said over the years. And it's an important component if we're going to understand their strategic view of how to proceed.
Really interesting. Anyway, there'll be lots to report on when we get to Hanoi and watch this summit. Robert.